Good morning. This is My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. My mom will not be singing. Um, This is August 8th. We are in the book of Genesis. So I look so uncertain. We are in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is divided into three sections, four sections as I see it. And we're in the fourth section now. We're starting the fourth section. From chapters 1 through 11, God is pointing out the problem with man. Here's what happened. Adam and Eve in the garden, Cain and Abel, Noah, all of that, right? And then starting with chapter 12, they're about 12 chapters each in each section, basically. Starting with chapter 12, he said, and here's how I'm solving the problem. And we deal with Abraham for about 12 chapters. I need to find a man who I will bless, who I will teach my gospel to, and he'll teach it to his children. And he and his descendants will be a sign in the earth that God is dealing with man and has a way of salvation, right? I'm not only saving his descendants, but I want his descendants, how I interact with them, what I do with them, to be a sign to the rest of the world that there is a way out. But you got to know first there's a problem, then the way out of the problem. So that's Genesis 12 through basically 24. Starting around chapter 24, there's 4 chapters of his son Isaac, and then 8 chapters of his grandson Jacob, right? So that's about 12 chapters also, up to about chapter 36. So we're watching how God deals with him, and he comes in and he makes appearances. God shows up and says, Abraham, I want you to do this, and Isaac, and there's altars and there's sacrifices, and Jacob, he appears to Jacob, and there's a ladder of there's a it's not really a ladder because it's on 2 sides and there's angels going up and down both sides, but whatever you call that, a stairway to heaven. Um, and God is greatly saying, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to deal with you. I want you to know that I'm going to bless you, and that through this seed of this family, this specific, their descendants, I'm going to bring in the Messiah, who I promised way back in Genesis chapter 3, right after Adam and Eve sinned in the first place. I said, the seed is coming, right? So now you know how it's going to come. You can watch this family, watch this space. You can watch this uh, family to see exactly how I'm going to do it and know that the Messiah will come through this line, right? And then that would lead us to that'd be 12, 24, 36. In chapter 36, he just takes a moment to says, okay, here these are the descendants of Esau, the brother that I'm not really blessing in the same way as his twin brother Jacob. Now in 37 to the end, so he really got 13 chapters. It would have been nice if it was 12, 12, 12, 12. From 37 to 50 is all about Joseph. And God changes his style of writing here. There are no appearances from God for the next 13 chapters. There's no um, divine God showing up and lighting a bush on fire, or angels showing up. God purposely is showing us, here's how I work behind the scenes. So he tells this story directly through just looking at the people and their interactions. And you see what happens to Joseph. And then I'm going to give away the ending of the movie, which you're not supposed to do. At the very end, then Joseph goes, oh, God was there all along. All that stuff that happened to me, oh, that was God. See, I'm giving away the ending. But he purposely says, I'm going to show you, because this is how your lives are going to be. I'm very seldom going to just light a bush on fire while you're walking by or give you visions of angels going up and down. But please know that I'm always working in your life. And so he tells the story of Joseph without any of that. There just aren't any divine appearances of God. And yet we're supposed to learn in the end, God's behind everything that happens. Uh, so, so we're going to start there, chapter 37. That's not it. Let me bring up chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, and it begins this way. Um, now Jacob dwelt in the land. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for signing in. I see all of that. The first sentence is interesting. Now Jacob dwelt in the land. He lived there where his father was a stranger. When you hear about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Abraham says, it was always said he's just a sojourner in the land, a foreigner in that land. Isaac, the same thing. He's described as a stranger in that land, sojourner. They use the word sojourner, which is an old English word. It just means he's a stranger. That's not really, he dwelt there as a visitor. But Jacob lived there. Jacob said, okay, this is my land, and that's going to be significant. He's claiming that land. By the way, at this time when Joseph is 17, Jacob's second youngest son, Isaac is still alive. So their grandfather of Reuben and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, all of them, their grandfather's still alive. Grandfather Isaac lived for 12 more years. So Isaac is living with them or nearby. And so they are aware of the history. They know everything that God said to Abraham, to Isaac, because he's still alive, and to Jacob. They know that God said, I'm giving you this land. So far, they are only in Hebron. They're living in Hebron, and they own some land in Shechem. And it's about 100 miles worth of land, Israel, right? They own some land they own a cave near the tree of Mamre. And that's it. But God said, no, I'm going to give you this land. Well, Esau never bought it. And Esau went and conquered on the east side of Jordan all this land that they call Edom now. And, well, they don't call it now, but in the Bible they call it Edom. And because he just didn't get it. I don't know. The Canaanites live here. But Jacob, that's the difference between Jacob and Esau. Jacob said, no, I believe God's going to give us this land. So he lived there. He was no longer a stranger like his father and his grandfather, right? I'm living in the land of Canaan, and this is the history of Jacob. Now, this is also the history of how Moses, who's putting all of this history together for them in the book of Genesis, is all the history of how we ended up in Egypt. So I do want to refer back to Genesis chapter 15, because here's what God said to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, when he makes this covenant with him. He says, now, so Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. At the time he's Abram, he's not yet Abraham. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. So in his sleep, he's having this dark dream, right? Something bad is going to happen. Then God said to Abraham, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. Not this land, because Jacob lived in this land, but your descendants are going to be strangers in land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve, though I will judge, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried at a good age. But in the fourth generation, so at that time he's calling generations like 100 years. In the fourth generation, the fourth 100 years, they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So 400, they'll be there for 400 years. When they come back, they'll begin to conquer the land. But I'm giving them a 400-year period because I'm giving the Amorites all this time to repent. They are the least evil of all the Canaanites. But they're not going to. I already know they're going to keep sinning. sinning, and then I'm going to finally have to say, okay, that's enough. And now it's time for you to conquer the land. Now, I do want to uh, talk about this idea if God sent them to Egypt to punish the Israelites, or if God is simply saying, here's what's going to happen. I remember when I taught my art history class, my humanities class, and really we studied the history of the world, starting at the first piece of art back in Babylon, the Woman of Willendorf in a cave, the oldest piece of art they've ever found. We study all the history and what was going on making up that art, all the way to today. I couldn't think of a rapper today because that's who I am. I was going to say all the way to Ice Cube or whoever, because I don't know any rappers. But anyway, all the way up to today. So um, the first week I teach that class, we're just going over the terms we're going to be using. Here's what color means. Here's what tint and hue and shade. And it's the easiest. That first week is so easy because it's just, we literally just going to be talking about how we're going to describe the art, what I mean by shape or what I mean by the color or value. It's so easy, right? Just words we've all heard. You don't ever have to even have taken, you don't have to have read the first chapter to get an A on that test. But I warned them because they all come in, they've heard about this class. They can't wait to get into my humanities class. I said, this first test is easy, but next week the test is going to be hard. Well, they take that first test, everybody gets an A, like, this was so easy. And in their minds, they put it all together. We got a funny teacher, he's really easy, his tests are easy. So the second week, they do not study. I warned them, you're going to get, more than half of you are going to fail this test because you're going to think, oh, all his tests are easy. Look how easy that was. I warned them because I taught the class for several years. I know what's going to happen. They don't listen to the warning. And sure enough, I passed back bunches of fails. 60 to 70% of the class all fail that test because they don't study. The second chapter, because it's just so easy in their minds, I don't make them fail. I didn't make them fail. I warn them because I just know what they're going to do. I know what they're going to do. The third week, I say, okay, so here's what, and I do this every year. I'm going to have this test count double. So whatever you get on this test, you can erase that grade from the, it'll count for that grade where you got to fail. So if you get an A on this test, that means you have 3 A's in a row now. If you get a B on this test, you got an A and 2 B's. You get a C on this test, you got an A and 2 C's. So whatever you get on this test is going to count double, but you better study. So here's your salvation. I already have it prepared for them, right? Here's your way out because I know what they're going to do. And that is what God did here when he says, your sins will be strangers in land that is not theirs. I already know what they're going to do. I'm not sending you to Egypt. You're going to go there. And that's the big contention. God sent them to Egypt in order to protect them. Well, no, God didn't need them to be in Egypt in order to make them a great and mighty nation. He just knew this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to Egypt and you're going to stay there, and then they're going to make you slaves. And I'm telling you in advance so that you won't do that, but I know that you will. And I told my students in advance, you're not going to study. I'm telling you so that you will realize, oh, I better study, but I know how you are. So anyway, this is the story now of how they got there, So this is the history of Jacob. All that was just verse 2. Bless my heart, I talk so much. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brother. So Joseph is 17. When we see him finally in Egypt and he becomes a vice president of Egypt, he's 30. So there's a 13-year period that goes by. His grandfather, Isaac, passes away a year before they discover that Joseph is still alive, right? That he's actually in Egypt. So I'm sure everybody knows his story, that Joseph's going to end up in Egypt. So he's 30 when he begins his ministry. Jesus was 30 when he began his ministry. David was also, he was 13, and when he was anointed, and it was 17 years before he became king, and he was also 30 when he began. It's really interesting. So there's something about the life of Joseph and David and Jesus that we're supposed to study, because God repeats patterns so that we'll recognize them. He does things. Let me show you this way, and then I'm gonna show it to you again, and then so that you'll recognize, oh, this is God when it's happening. Okay, so Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. So he's not with Leah's kids, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar. He's not with them. It's not Issachar and Dan. I forget what the other one is. But anyway, he's not with them because they hate him. But he's with Bilhah. Now, Bilhah was his mother's maid. So that's the least amount of anger, right? Bilhah had two kids and Zilpah had two kids. But he's like their apprentice. Now, he's the youngest, aside from Benjamin, who was just born a year before the story starts. And Joseph's mother has passed away, right, a year ago. So he has no protection anymore. He has a baby brother who is 16 years younger than him. And his older brother is 30. So Reuben is 30 when the story starts. Um, and because remember, they had kids for 14 years. Leah, he married for 7 years. Rachel, 7 more years. That's 14 years. Basically, had a kid every year. And Joseph was born in that 14th year. So there's 13. So Reuben's 13 years older. Why do I have to keep talking? Bless my mouth. Okay. So uh, he's tending the flocks because he's kind of an apprentice. He's in 1 Samuel 16:11. Samuel the prophet comes to Jesse, the father of David, and it says, "Are all the young men here?" Because remember, he wants to anoint one of them king. And he says, "Nope, there remains the youngest yet, and there he is keeping the sheep." So the youngest, kind of, that was their job. We're going to do our thing. You watch over the sheep. Nothing more boring than just sitting and staring at sheep. David turned it like into a thing. Well, while I'm here, I'll write a bunch of songs. Uh, but Joseph, that was just kind of his job. In 1 Samuel 17, verse 17 through 18, uh, Jesse said to his son David, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves." His brothers had gone off to war to fight Goliath. They didn't end up fighting Goliath because Goliath turned out to be scary. But David was like the errand boy for his brothers. Here, it says, "Take in some dried grain." This is 1 Samuel 17:17. "And these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of the thousands, and see how your brothers fare, and then bring back news of them." So that was also the job of the youngest, to tell the dad, here's what they're doing. And Joseph loved that part, right? And it says, "And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father." So while he's tending sheep, Jacob's kids, who work mad at their father, and we'll see why in just a minute, would always be doing their own thing and getting in and just doing what they weren't supposed to be doing. And Joseph was the tattletale. But it was also his job. He didn't have to do it, right? Or he could have, but he loved. Let me tell you what they did. Okay, so now in verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Well, actually, so was Benjamin, right? Well, Joseph's little brother, was the son of his old age. But when Benjamin was born the year that Rachel died, and so he didn't have the same feeling about Benjamin that he did about Joseph, right? He's my youngest son, and then I had this other one when my wife died. But I love me some Joseph. And he made him a coat of many colors. So these are going to be all the reasons why his brothers hated Joseph. And a lot of it stemmed from Jacob and how he treated him. His brothers weren't just crazy. Um, Jacob caused a lot of the dissension between Joseph and his brothers. So let's talk about this coat of many colors, which is a very unusual thing to give to your son. In 2 Samuel 13, verse 18, talking about Tamar, David's daughter, it says, "Now she had on a robe of many colors." This is the only other time we ever hear in the Bible somebody having, these are the same word, a coat of many colors. For the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. So it seems that this is something you normally give your daughters. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Well, that's a different story about why that happened, but which I don't want to get into. But a coat of many colors was not a normal thing that you needed to wear while you were tending the sheep. But he wore it. He loved him that. So Jacob is making Joseph, you're special, right? Uh, and also, he had been hinting already that Joseph was going to get the birthright, right? Because it says remember in First Chronicles 5:1, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Reuben's the oldest, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. So we don't know when Joseph and his sons got that news. But I think the brothers were suspecting it. It seems like he told him on his deathbed, you're going to get the double portion. And that's what the birthright was. The oldest son would get a double portion of the land. If you divide it into 5, he would get 5 and 6. If you divide it into 8 pieces, he would get 7 and 8. He got a double portion because if something happened to the younger sons, then he had to take in their wives and their kids, and that was the job of the older son. So he got a double portion. Doesn't mean any, but everybody got something. But I think it was on the deathbed that he let it be known. But I think the other brothers were kind of suspecting. He's really favoring Joseph, right? So in Genesis chapter 37:4 it says, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So they hated him for a lot of reasons. He was favoring him all the time, right? Announced to everyone, this is my favorite son. Gave him a coat of many colors. And also, this started when they were little. This started when Joseph was maybe 6 years old. Jacob made it clear. Do you remember when Esau was on his way to meet Jacob? Jacob hadn't seen his twin brother for 20 years. And he's praying to God, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me and my wife. That's what he's thinking. And that's every action. He kept sending him while he's on his way. Give him this and give him that. And you get a car and you get a car. Just kept, please don't kill me. And his fear is obviously being translated to his kids. Like, Esau's coming, he's going to kill us. So it says, now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked. This is Genesis 33, verse 1 and 2. And there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So Jacob has 11 boys, and Esau has 400 men. So he's scary. He's scared. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants. Everybody take your kids. And he put the maidservants and their children in front. So Zilpah, you go first. And then 100 feet behind them, I'm going to put Bilhah and her 2 kids. He says, and Leah and her children behind them. And then Rachel and Joseph last. So you got 2 sons with 1 maid and 2 sons with 1 maid and 6 sons with mom. And then they look and Joseph's by himself because Benjamin hasn't been born yet. And he's last, and Jacob is clearly saying, he can kill you first, he can kill you first, because so he's telling them, this is is most important to me. Rachel and Joseph. They're the most important. So you guys are expendable. So we wonder, why did they hate his brothers were so mean? And no. Father did this. Started it. Jacob started this. Here's how Joseph compounded on. Now it says they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So they just were mean to him all the time, right? To Joseph, because you're the favorite. And he gave you. Joseph has a problem that he's not picking up on social cues. Mm-hmm. He thinks everybody loves him. Miss Griffin, he likes you. So so they would growl at him, right? And they go, look, they're smiling at me. No, they're about to eat you. So It says now, so Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers. And they hated him even more. So they hated him before the dream. They can't even speak peaceably. But he's not good at picking up on social cues. Because they hate him. They can't even speak peaceably. But he thinks everybody loves him because that's the world he grew up in. His father loved him from the beginning and showered him with gifts and loved him. Everyone, the world revolves around you. And when we spoil our children like that, they think the whole world revolves around them. And why isn't everybody why do I have to wait in line? Why can't I go up to the front? And why do I have to do this? Why can't I just, because that's how they think the world is, right? So his brothers hate him. Joseph had no idea. So he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Now, so he has this dream. We have dreams all the time, but I'm telling you this dream because it's special. Everybody has dreams. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 2 and 3. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 2, it says, "Do not be rash with your mouth, and let not your heart utter anything hastily before God." Don't just, well, blah, 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 right? For God is in heaven and you're on earth. So you don't know everything. Keep your mouth closed because you don't know everything. Therefore, let your words be few. For a dream comes through much activity, meaning you're running around all day and you'll get a dream. That doesn't mean that's from God. Don't say, "Oh, I had a dream that a giant pizza, floated me over into Paris and blah, blah." And so that doesn't mean nothing other than you're hungry and you want some pizza. So he said, don't be rash with your mouth, because for a dream comes through much activity, and a fool's voice is known by his many words. So just because something popped into your mind doesn't mean you have to tell it. Just because you had a dream doesn't mean you have to tell it. However, the Bible says some dreams are actually from God. In Numbers chapter 12, verse 6 through 8. And again, his brothers had heard about his father and grandfather, and right, having these experiences with, and great grandfathers, right, having these experiences with God. So this is God speaking to Noah's brother, Aaron and Miriam, after they kind of were confronting Moses about some choices he was making in his life. Numbers 12, verse 6 is, so God says, "Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision, or speak to him in a dream." So it's kind of, I'll if there's a prophet, this is what I do. But it's not even so with my servant Moses. So he says, just a general principle. There's plenty of prophets. I'll give them a vision, or they'll have a dream. This is how I speak to them. He says, not so with my servant Moses. He's faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, because that's another way he likes speaking to us in mysterious, and then have you figured out later. God wants to tell us things, but not really have you know what he's talking about until later. That's what is going to happen in Joseph's story. At the end, Joseph goes, "Oh, now I know what this all means." We always think we know what God means when he says something to us. "Ooh, that means I'm supposed to go and be an astronaut." No. Right. Well, so my wife was just saying, sometimes God doesn't say it because you might say, "No, I'm not going to do that." So God doesn't tell you what he's going to do. He just does it. But other times, God does show us things in advance, but he doesn't tell it to us plainly. And we need to just wait and see what it's going to all mean. Don't speak rashly. He says, "But Moses, I spoke to face to face. I didn't speak to him in dark sayings. He sees the form of the Lord." Like, I'm right there in his face. So then he says, "Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Don't you know I talked to him face to face? So if Moses tells you something, I don't understand why you're going against him. Other people, I get it, because I spoke in dark sayings, I speak in dreams, and they have to interpret it. But Moses, I talk him face to face, so you should be scared. But so God is saying, I do speak this way. Solomon in Ecclesiastes says, every dream you get is not God. So some of your dreams just come because you're busy. You have a lot of activity going on in your life, and then your mind's trying to sort it out at night. But God says, sometimes I will speak that way. Deuteronomy 13, verse 1 through 3 says, if there rises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder. So there's two different things. I might speak to a prophet in a vision, or there may be somebody, that's how I speak to them, in their dreams. right? At which you're recognizing this is an unusual dream. So this must be God, because normally when I dream, blah, 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 but I had a dream last night and it was so vivid and so real. Something told me that that was a special dream. So if you have a dreamer of dreams in your midst, he says them, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods. So I can, there are people that I use in that way, but they might use it to their own advantage. So some people are gifted. God does give them dreams, but they might, just because I've used them in one way doesn't mean that everything that they do you have to buy. And well, that last time that thing they said came true, so this time, even though they said something crazy, I'm going to believe it. He says, not necessarily, because they may speak to you saying, let's go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them. So they may be leading you in a wrong direction. He says, you should not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. So again, if God has used somebody in a certain way, that does not mean that every single thing they say next is from God. They're human. They may do, I dreamed last night that we're all supposed to kill short people or so. I'm just making stuff, right? They could, well, it must be true because that last thing they said 2 years ago was true. Yes, it was. But that doesn't mean everything they say from now on is true. And that's how I think people got hung up this past couple years listening to certain prophets in the church who had prophesied correctly, but then we're now assuming that everything they then say is then true. Not necessarily. He says, for the Lord the God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. So if they say a crazy thing to you, please know the test is on you now. Are you going to listen to me or are you going to listen to that person? Are you still going to love God? And because you still have to go to God no matter what you hear, no matter what a prophet or somebody tells you. Let me go to God and pray about that. Say 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 15. Samuel, I'm just going over all the dream things that happen in the Bible because I'd like to be well-rounded, right? 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 15. Now Samuel said to Saul, now this is after Samuel is already dead. Samuel is dead, and Saul goes to one of those soothsayers, Madam Sula, who can bring up spirits, right? And Samuel says to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up from the dead? And Saul answered, I'm deeply distressed. For the Philistines are making war against me, and God has departed from me and does not answer me anymore, neither by prophets nor by dreams. So I do want to make sure that, dreams is a valid way of God speaking to us. That's why I've called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do. Now he goes on to say to him, God's already told you what you're going to do. That's why you haven't heard anything else. You're wanting something new from God, and God's already told you. And sometimes that's what messes us up. We don't like what God told us to do. But God's waiting for us to do the thing that he said for us to do. I'm not going to tell you the next thing. And it could be 10 years. It could be 20 years. Like, no, sorry, I'm waiting for you. God says, I haven't forgotten what I said to you 20 years ago. Uncle Barney or Auntie Susie, they forget. I just had a friend tell me yesterday, my mom would say, well, you can't have any ice cream until you eat your vegetables. And he says, I always knew as a kid I could just wait her out. He says, so I won't eat. I just wouldn't eat. And then the mom, of course, panicked. Well, it's bedtime and you haven't eaten anything. Okay, you can have some ice cream. But you can't wait God out. God's like, don't eat. I'm not, that's fine. Because I told you this one thing, and I am the Lord and I change not. Mama might change, but I change not. So he tells Saul, God's already told you. He's not going to change. So you're waiting for a new word. He's waiting for you to do the word that he told you already. Trust me, that's a God thing. That's how God operates. And here's the last one. Genesis chapter 41:32. It says, this is Pharaoh had a dream. And once Joseph's going to get to Egypt and he's going to interpret Pharaoh's dream, in Genesis 41:32, it says, and the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because the thing is established by God and God will shortly bring it to pass. So if you have the same dream twice, That's God saying to you, this thing is established. You can have a dream and go, wow, I had the craziest dream. But then the next night you have the exact same dream. And again, it's not a dream that comes because you're worried about you stubbed your toe or you have a bill to pay and it's not a dream that your mind created. It's a dream that you're pretty clear. This is from God. It's very specific and he says if you have it twice in a row, that's because God's saying this is established. This is not something that might happen. This is something that's going to happen shortly. So there's a lot of information in the Bible about dreams, and we just need to know it all. Solomon says, you only had those dreams because your mind is busy, you've been doing too much. They're not from God. And yet God says, but I do speak in dreams. So just because Solomon said that, sometimes I do speak in dreams. But sometimes your dream could be wrong. It can be misinterpreted, so we have to just try not to make a single rule about dreams. So anyway, Joseph has a dream. So he says to his brothers who hate him, his brothers hate him. I just want to keep saying that. Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. You're going to love this dream. There we were binding sheaves in the fields, right? So they're making big, right? And then behold, my sheaf arose and it stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed to my sheaf. Isn't that cool? He thinks they're going to love this dream. I had this great dream where you're all bowing down to me. Isn't that wonderful? Aren't you excited for me? This is another reason why they hated him. Totally tone deaf to what you do know that Father favors you all the time and has given you a coach and you never have to do any work and now you think we're going to get excited about a dream where we bow down to. We're already suspicious that our dad's going to give you extra land, right? And they're worried because before then, because Ishmael, when Abraham had Isaac, Ishmael had to leave, and Isaac therefore was going to inherit everything. When Isaac had Jacob and Esau, there's just two brothers, and one brother left, and so Isaac's going to have to care. But Isaac, there are 12 sons, all trying to divide up this little bit of land that they're living on. So it's like, so it's already competition, and clearly Dad's favoring the youngest, second youngest. So his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion? Or what are you trying to say? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So if we did not hate you with us, now we really hate you because you think we're going to love these dreams. So what did Joseph do? Joseph said, well, I'm not going to tell you any more dreams. Oh, no, no, no. Verse 9 of chapter 37, then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers. And what is that? What is that? Yes. Hey. Let me just wrap myself in my coat. And they said, we hate you for your dreams. So he had another one said, okay, but you thought that was good? No, we didn't think it was good. We told you we hate you. Well, you're going to love this one. No, we're not. So then he dreamed and still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I dreamed another dream. And this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me. So I guess, so he was a star. He was the 12th star, right? So my star was there and all your stars and even the sun and the moon were bowing down to me. So my first dream was just about the brothers. But this dream is about mom and dad, right? So I do want to stop because the star imagery became a thing in Jewish history. Because the stars represented the 12 brothers. Other cultures that adopted that talked about the 12 constellations because they heard how the sky was divided into 12 parts, but they got that from Joseph and his dreams and Jewish culture. Whenever they were prophets that were talking about the stars, that represented them. That represented the Jewish people. So I'll give you some examples of that. In Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. That prophet, the two prophets, one saying to the other, hey, I want you to prophesy against the Jews. And he says, no, I'm not going to prophesy against the Jews. How can I prophesy? I forget his name. But anyway, he says, here's what I see. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. So somebody's coming. I see him, but he's not here yet. He says, a star shall come out of Jacob, right? And because the stars again represents the kings of Israel that are going to come, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel and batter the brow of Moab and destroy all the sons of tumult. And he's saying there's going to be a star that's going to rise, a king will rise from Jacob who's going to destroy Moab. And actually from Joseph's line of Ephraim, their kings arose and they did attack the Moabites. The Moabites are the children of Lot. And it says, and then a scepter shall arise from Israel, and that's representing from Judah's line, Jesus, who came and destroyed the sons of chaos, anarchy, of wickedness, right? And so when you talked about a star, you were often talking about some future king or something, but you were talking about the Israelites. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 10, it says, and out of one of them came a little horn. Okay, so he's having a vision. This is Daniel's dream. This is now about Alexander the Great, who's going to come, how the Greeks are going to come and attack the Persians. And he's going to go and conquer all the way to India. It says in this prophecy, it says, but out of, and then he'll be divided into 4 sections, and it were when Alexander the Great died, they divided his kingdom into 4 sections. He says, and out of one of those sections, this is Daniel's dream, came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south. This is Antiochus Epiphanes, who in history tortured the Jews. He says, toward the east and toward the glorious land. And it grew up to the host of heaven, talk about the stars in heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. And this is a warning that this Antiochus Epiphanes is going to attack some of the leaders in Israel. Because again, Joseph started this, we talked about his dream representing the 12 tribes, the 12 brothers, those stars in the sky represent the 12 brothers. So a lot of time when prophecies would come out, when he's talked about the stars will be cast down, the stars will fall to the ground, he means the Jewish leaders will be attacked. He literally did not, Antiochus Epiphanes did not attack the stars, but he attacked these leaders who represents the 12 tribes of Israel, which is true. In Isaiah chapter 13, verse 9 through 10, he says, behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel, and with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners from it. So the day of the Lord is coming. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. Now we always think literally, oh, the stars are going to go dark in the heavens. But he's talking about these Jewish leaders again that represent the 12 tribes. Joseph started that with his dreams. The sun will be darkened and is going forth, and the moon will not have its light shine. And he's saying, remember Joseph's dream of the sun and moon and all this stuff? They'll be darkened. So these leaders, these Jewish leaders, these Jewish kings are going, when he comes, the day of the Lord, the Jewish leaders will be attacked. Jesus referenced it in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, 32 through 34. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. Because they're asking Jesus, when will the temple be thrown down? Because you just said, see these stones here at the temple? They're all going to be thrown down. When? So he's telling them, here's going to be the sign of when that's going to happen. And he says, and then immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Again, we interpret this as great cataclysmic things happening that we'll be able to see stars falling from heaven and all. But he's talking about the Jewish leaders, which is exactly what happened, are going to fall. They'll lose their place. They'll be killed. And that's what happened. That generation that saw that when the temple was thrown down, all the Jewish leaders were destroyed and killed, those who had remained in Jerusalem. So he's using that same imagery. In verse 32 of Matthew 24, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that summer's near. So just like when you can see, oh, look, I can tell when when things start to blossom. So you also, when you see these things, know that it's near, it's at the doors. And assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. This generation that I'm talking to, this generation that I'm looking at right now, You're going to see the temple tumble down and the stars fall from heaven. Again, not literal stars. All the Jewish leaders representing the 12 tribes will be cast down. So when Joseph has his dream about the stars, you were all stars in heaven, that stuck in the Jewish mind for thousands of years. That's how they saw their leaders. So he told his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him this time and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So now, because he's had the dream twice, they're thinking, uh-oh, this might happen. This might happen because he's had it twice in a row, same sort of dream. His father's mad now because now you put me in the dream like I'm about down to you. You really think a lot of yourself. I don't know how you got to think so highly of yourself. Ooh, but I like that coat I gave you. So then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem, which is 60 miles away from Hebron. So they went 60 miles away just to get away from dad and go do their own thing, right? Oh, we're going to tend the sheep, but we're going to go 60 miles and then we'll do it. And his Israel said to Joseph, now it's interesting that they call him Israel because they go back and forth calling him Israel, sometimes calling him Jacob, sometimes. Israel is inadvertently doing the will of God. Jacob's fighting against the will of God. Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I'm going to send you to them." So he said to him, "Okay, here I am. I'll go." He was eager to go because I get to go see what they're doing. They all left me here by myself. I don't know why, because I know they love me, but I'd love to see them. So I want to go. That sounds great. I will go 60 miles by myself to Shechem. In Genesis chapter 14. So then he said to him, "So please go and see if it's well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me." So I'm sending you basically to spy on them and let me know what are they doing, because they have a tendency to get in trouble when I'm not around. You know, your oldest brother slept with my wife, and then the next two went and killed a bunch of people. So please make sure it's well with them, and then bring back word, spy on them. It's another reason why they hate him. Right. Okay. So then he said, so he sent him sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man said to him, so because the brothers weren't there in Shechem, they weren't there. He got there, they weren't there. They say a certain man found him. God doesn't want you to know that this is an angel. So he specifically identifies him. Just some man accidentally out of nowhere walked up to him and said, "Who are you seeking?" So he said, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks." And the man said, "Oh, well, they've departed from here, for I overheard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" I just happened walking by and heard their plans. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. So I'm stopping there. But he's telling us the story in this way because God is the God now who's behind the scenes. And that's how our lives, our regular normal day lives are. We just see normal things and people come after it and say, "Hey, did you ever think about going down to here?" Or somebody called you up and, "Oh, hey, I was just thinking you should be," and we go, "Oh, I never thought of that." And we need to start recognizing that may have been God that did that. But that's not how we see things, right? But God purposely just sent some man, just happened to overhear the comment. "Oh, I just happened to run into you and happened to roll over that conversation." And yeah, they're up there in Dothan. And he's telling them the story this way because he wants us to see this is how your life plays out. But in the end of the story, you'll find out I was behind the whole thing. There was not a moment, even if somebody did something to you, there's not a moment that I didn't know that was going to happen and that I already had prepared a way of escape, or it already was going to, like if a storm comes, if you end up in a pit, if you end up in prison, I'm there with you through all that thing, and you will look back at your life and go, "Oh, he was there all the time." And if we can learn that, we'll just live in less fear, we'll live in less stress, because we go, God never leaves us, he never forsakes us. So even though we think things are happening arbitrarily, God's saying, "I am always with you. None of this happened by mistake. None of this happened and I didn't know it and I'm playing catch up and, ooh, I got to fix this. I'm with you." So he's going to tell the story. You're not going to see one vision from God. You're going to see one thing, but you're going to see Joseph in the end go, oh, God was behind the whole thing. God was there. Oh, I get it now. And that's an important thing for us to learn. Okay, so but I'm going to stop and we're continuing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening each week or every other week, whatever it is that you do. I appreciate it. And some of you, I'll see you on Wednesday, where we are at the cross. Jesus is being crucified. We are in the book of Matthew. And others of you, I'll see you next Sunday. So God bless you. Amen.